What's up, WonderCon? Let me hear your voices. Thank you so much for being here, you guys, and thank you, Andrew. What's up, WonderCon? I'm so excited to be here to talk to these very talented creatives who are here to share their insights on what it takes to bring a story to life. As we all know, our favorite TV shows and movies are the result of countless hours of hard work, collaboration, and creativity. I'd love to get started at the beginning of the filmmaking process, which starts with the producers. So this question is for Anthony. Anthony, as a showrunner, executive producer, and writer, subtle flex, what is your approach to the overall creative process in the various television series that you've worked on?
Oh, wow. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing? It's good to be here with you on a Saturday morning. The first approach, I would say, is, and it's going to sound a little earnest, but it tends to be the guiding light that is the first seed of a show being born. And that is, what do you want to say? What world are you trying to explore? What questions are you trying to ask? What images are you trying to create that are then going to be deposited into the middle of pop culture and hopefully create a conversation around it? So I start with, what do you want to say? The theme, as it were, and what world you want to explore and put on TV.
Solid advice, and clearly it works for you. Rachel, your production company, Contradiction and Struggle, focuses on telling stories that are inclusive and generate conversations around community and respectability. How do you bring this mentality to all of the projects that you produce?
For me, it's really about community. Like being here today, it's exciting for me to know who my audience is, who's existing in the world. And, I'm just a curious person. I grew up on the Lower East Side of New York City, probably one of the most multicultural places in the world. So I grew up, my neighbors were Orthodox Jews, Chinese of every kind, Puerto Ricans, many, many people from all over the world, right? Whether they're Dutch or Swedish or Irish, it's something that I'm used to. And my own family is also very multiracial. I happen to be Nigerian and Japanese American. And I live in the Heights, in Washington Heights. Me aparece como dominicana, so I speak Spanish.
Muy bien.
And I'm interested in people. And I think my first love was always art and sociology, anthropology, just understanding what we want in the world. And I like stories and characters, and I'm interested, so I do my research. Sometimes that's really going to the places, like here, right? Or traveling to the Middle East or South America. But if I'm writing a story, I really want to know that I'm representing those people. I also started a culture shift sort of storytelling portal when I was chair of the Producers Guild of America's Diversity Committee, and I started a Women's Impact Network. So a lot of the things that I wanted to see in the world I had to create with collectives. And when we couldn't find people, we would have these gatherings. I used to have a lot of kind of women's celebration parties that were actually very co-ed. But that was the trick, really, to say, okay, here's these 10 women's groups. Some of them have become bigger now, like Brown Girl Stock Mafia, or Array, or, on and, there's so many, Them Patals, but I just would speak to all of the leaders of these organizations and then invite them, and we would have inter-guild mixers. And so then it really just demystified the process of it, and those people become friends and colleagues, and then you can call on them. So I really do it by building community.
I used to live in Washington Heights. We're going to talk later.
Okay.
All right, art. Diving into the production process, let's take it over to you. How did you approach creating visual effects for a series like Outer Banks that has such a strong emphasis on natural environments and practical stunts?
I think I'm going to piggyback on what Anthony was saying, where it's like you have a story to tell. What is the point you're trying to make? When we get a script, it's like with our visual effects, we're storytellers. Everybody, every department is telling the story. And when something comes to us, it's like, how do we continue that? How do we tell the story? Yeah, we can do some stuff that's cool. We can put dragons in it, whatever, but that's not the story.
Sure.
So that's really the essence of where we start. And then, of course, there's all the, the other things to consider, budget, time deliveries, and all that. But that's pretty much where we start.
Got it. So Shrinking is the latest comedy series to come from Apple TV Plus. And Cabot, you are the production designer. How did you collaborate with the talented cast to create realistic designs for their characters?
Good morning. Great question. Thank you. Well, first of all, Bill Lawrence brought us all together. He's the exec producer, creator of the show. And he assembled this incredible cast and incredible crew, amazing creatives. It's really my job to tell you something about the characters that the script can't tell you with words. So it's basically a visual language, it's visual subtext. In this case, we had Jason Segel as one of our producers, who's incredibly talented as a writer, actor, director. He makes music. I mean, he's hitting things on so many levels, and he brought a lot of really great ideas to the character of Jimmy. It's a story about a man who's in grief. We find him a year after his wife has died in a car accident. And so he's really not taking care of himself. He's not taking care of his family, his daughter. Things are kind of falling apart. And he's trying to find his way forward, but he's not doing a great job of it. So we were trying to find a visual hook to tell you, where he was at in his life. And so with James Ponsold, our director, we came up with this idea that this was a man who was living in the darkness. And all the drapes were drawn in his house. We painted everything in a darker tone. And then we decided that over 10 episodes, we would see this man slowly emerge from the darkness. So basically telling it like a 5-hour movie. And Jason was very instrumental in helping us kind of calibrate all those steps of his character. Harrison Ford signed on a little bit later in prep, and so a lot of our design work was done when he arrived. But he came in just full of ideas. He's a real working actor. He's very prepared. His character was based on a real world therapist named Phil Stutz. There's a great documentary out right now that Jonah Hill directed about him. And so Harrison went in and spent time with Phil and really dug into who this guy was and what he needed to sort of put his character out there as a man with Parkinson's disease. So he came in, and the first day we met with him, he was like, I need a chair with really strong arms so I can do push-ups on the chair, because at the end of a day where I've been sitting around a lot, I need to work my body out and stuff like that. So he had a lot of great ideas. Jessica Williams came in, and she had all kinds of great ideas about her character and culturally specific ideas about art and books. Lakita Maxwell, who plays the daughter Alice, she also had a lot of great thoughts about who her family might have been, a multiracial family with Indonesian parents and grandparents. And so basically what I do is I get the whole thing set up, they come in and they put the top layer on. They're allowed to kind of
do the last coat of paint.
Exactly.
I like it. You guys, we have some congratulations in order. I don't know if you knew that. Get your hands ready, because Robyn, congrats on your recent Ace Eddie Awards for a Black Lady sketch show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very cool, very cool. How did you approach editing the sketch comedy aspect of the show?
Yes. So, hello. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. Black Lady Sketch Show. Any fans out there? Anybody? Yeah. Okay. So, Robyn Thede is the creator of Black Lady Sketch Show, and she's an amazing, talented person who is everywhere. And the clip that I had them show you today was one of the only times that she was not on set. And so that one was actually not the way she really intentionally wanted it. And so the reason I showed it is because it's one of those instances where everybody has the idea, all the creatives are together and wanting something, and it just doesn't quite get where it's supposed to land. And there was a thought when I got the material, this sketch might get cut. And everybody was mad about that because the character that Gabrielle Dennis, who is an amazing person, an amazing physical, funny comedian, there's a recurring character from season 1. So nobody was happy. And so Robyn basically pulled me aside and she goes, okay, I'm gonna give you a weekend to think of something. Think of something and bring it back around. And I thought, sure, no problem. I have no idea. So I really had to go back to season 1, see what Gabrielle had done in that first one, start thinking a little bit out of the box. What exactly, like Art, others here said, this has got to be, what's the story we're trying to tell? And it was the way it was sort of shot. It looked like a promo ad for, a politician. So that's what we decided to make it look like, one of those really cheesy political ads that you see on, let's just not name the network, shall we? And so I really started, that's when I started going, okay, I need the right music and I need like just these headshots of people in these ridiculous situations that look very staged. And then let's cut it in with Gabrielle sort of going, hi, And I really did sort of throw everything at it. And I came back and Robyn took a second and she goes, you really did something there, didn't you? And I was like, yes. Because the ultimate goal of all of the editors, and if you get a chance, Taylor Mason's going to be in the horror one. There's a panel for horror.
I believe it may be right after this.
So exactly. So Taylor was also she did season 4. I did last year season 3. So she was also in there, and our only goal when we're editing, especially the comedy, and you see how fast those jokes are coming, if we can make Robyn laugh, we are good. It's gonna sell, right? So that's
the
what
gauge.
that's what we ended up doing is, taking what we have and making it stellar and making it funny for our audience while telling the right story.
And winning awards while doing it. Man, yes, please. All right, so this next question is going to be for Andrew. Western films tend to have such a distinct and recognizable sound to them. The Nicolas Cage-led film The Old Way is one of the more recent entries into the Western genre. So can you tell us about your score and how you made it unique for the film?
So on The Old Way, whenever they first approached me on the project, the original thought that they had was using more of like a guitar-driven score, like a more modern take on a Western, and feels like I've seen Western scored in every genre, maybe save heavy metal. And but as I started exploring this movie and as we started getting footage back, it just wasn't quite working. Nothing was really working. The guitar stuff worked really well for the intimate stuff, but it didn't work for like the big scenic stuff. And the movie itself, tonally, is a much more optimistic film, whereas a lot of other Westerns have kind of taken on a much more gritty and dark tone. And we were a little worried that it wasn't going to be, that we were kind of have like tonal clash. So we needed to figure it out. And as the movie started to come together, the word they kept bringing back up was classic studio Western. That was like the idea of like, here's our modern take on a classic studio Western. The actors have, they're not, it's much more clean cut than a situation of like, oh, well, we're going to rub dirt in their teeth and then move forward, So the task was put to me of like, well, what is your take on the modern studio Western sound? Which was an interesting idea. Like, well, what's the updated version of that? And so I started to brainstorm on that, and one of the things that I finally landed on was incorporating Rocky Mountain folk music, because it's shot in Montana, and it's just something to make it a little unique, give it that element of something different, right? So I brought in, we'd used orchestra. I wanted to use orchestra, and then brought in a fiddle player I've used for years. He's a good friend of mine named Steve Reese, and then he brought in this banjo player that did a phenomenal job. And it was really this thing where, actually the scene that they showed, I had this idea and I had pitched it to the producers who are friends of mine, and they're like, yeah, like that sounds like it could work. That's an interesting move. And so I got so excited. That was the first sequence they ever showed me of the film. Ooh. And I wanted to test out this idea. So I actually took the sequence and I scored the whole sequence. And it's like, this is what I want to do, right? And I sent it to them, and they got so excited about it. They're like, yes, this is what I think that's actually what sold the director on me on that moment, was like, oh yes, okay, now I hear the full version of it. And as we progressed, the modern elements, like with on the fiddle and on the violin, on the fiddle and on the violins, we often are doing exchanging idioms and exchanging different ideas, and then also there's a lot of processing on the folk instruments. So this like banjo will often have like delays and all these different kinds of effects on it. And I mean, how often do you get to write action banjo? It's not something you get to do very often.
That's a very distinct genre.
Yeah, exactly. I can say I might win the Grammy in that category.
I hope so. I truly hope so.
Obviously.
Tweet about it, you guys.
Yeah, exactly. So that was kind of the bringing all the elements of the old. So it has like these old Copeland-esque elements, and then you bring forth these folk elements and mix them together and add in some more modern processing and sensibilities, and that's kind of where we landed.
Grammy campaign starts now.
Yeah.
Just so for everybody in the audience knows. So we've seen so many Cinderella adaptations over the years. The most recent entry, Sneakerella, proved to find new audiences and tapped into a more modern approach. Rachel, as an executive producer, how did you approach the retelling of such a popular story?
Well, first of all, how many people have seen Sneakerella? Some of you in here? If you haven't, go to Disney Plus and check it out. I'm very proud of it, and it's actually kind of a privilege to work with such a classic story. Right? And growing up, we all watch Cinderella, especially if you're a young woman, but the messages that are there in the story are for everyone. And I think that was, really this sort of kindness, not overlooking people that are doing the hard work, not setting up a hierarchy of who can be the chosen one, so to speak, right? And it's something that, as a child, I always found this fascinating. It's very romantic, but I never saw myself in that story. And I think many people, I don't think it's just because I'm African and Asian that I felt that. There were many ways in which, it was far away. It's like in a time long ago. And then you bring it, just like, Pretty Woman is a version of the Cinderella story, right? There are many of these. I think there's now Bad Cinderella on Broadway. And what we did was really say, okay, how do we modernize it and make it the character's Elle. He's a male African-American Cinderella. And it's set in Astoria in New York, which is the most diverse neighborhood in the world, apparently, and or one of. I think they're competing areas of Queens. But it's really what we did was we said, what is this sort of magic with a little m, right? Not a big M, that we could, in our communities, we have a lot of support. And the magic, so-called magic, is often from the people who see us, who have our backs when we don't even know that they're watching out for us. And, it's still the central story of, the Cinderella parent, the mother is gone. And we shot this in the middle of the pandemic in Toronto. So you had to quarantine for 2 weeks, right? And everyone who was part of it, right? Imagine you have to leave your families for at least half a year, go to a city where none of the restaurants are open, right? And start to bond in this way with people with masks and shields. And the whole communication was very different than it normally would be on a film set, and the bonding. And so as the executive producer, part of my role is really to work with both the department heads along with our line producer, but also the actors, right, who are carrying all of this and the pathos and the joy. And so it's a musical is the really big difference of, you know, creating a lot of original songs. There's only the one classic, A Dream is a Wish. And we cast these incredible actors, Chosen Jacobs, who is, I mean, yeah, his name is Chosen, and he is definitely that kid. So amazing. His mother was there the whole time. The other mother of our other lead, Lexi Underwood, who is phenomenal. She was in Little Fires Everywhere. They were both there. And so the responsibility is to tell this story, this classic story that we all grew up with. And it's in New York, sneaker culture, which I'm really familiar with because I used to do hip-hop music videos, and back then they would send us boxes and boxes of sneakers to put in our videos, right? So there's a culture that I know, and my nephew happened to be a young 15-year-old sneaker designer, and he's Afro-Latino, right? So these characters, you know, other friends are sneaker designers and choreographers. I went to High School of Music and Art, which was very much like that movie Fame. Like, we did dance on the tables, we did all kinds of crazy stuff. And that, to me, was actually very normal. And so while for other people it might seem like, oh, this is I knew those people really, really well. I knew their hopes, their dreams. I knew that, you know, it was important to have all of these different neighbors. And our team at Disney was amazing. Our execs, our creative executives are so committed to really creating something that all ages can watch. And from a pandemic, to bring such joy to people, right, to kind of, it's really about resilience and how do you gather people around you. And that, for me, was wonderful. Our fairy godfather, Juan Chiorian, incredible. Our best friend, Sammy, also Asian and Canadian and Hapa, like me. And, there was such a diverse crew that looked like the city that we were trying to emulate in another country. And I think it's really that when you're working on that kind of property that we all grew up with, the passion and the commitment from the choreographers, who won their first Emmy as well. Ooh. I won my first Emmy.
Round of applause, come on.
Our composer, Elvin Ross, who has done all of the Tyler Perry movies, he won his first Emmy for this.
Wow. Incredible.
And we were nominated for 11 Emmys. Yeah. And I think that, for me, is about, right? It's all the same amount of work, but if you make something that you're really committed to, the reward will be greater. And it was really wonderful to have it resonate with our community. And so I hope you all check it out because it's a beautiful movie and the music's fun. You'll be dancing in front of the TV.
On Disney Plus, correct?
On Disney
Plus. Write it down, folks. Write it down. Yeah. Anthony, with your recent work on Queen Sugar and Bel-Air, there's a definite focus on the Black community. How do you go about writing stories that have more of a social consciousness?
Well, first, if you're going to write stories that are, have something to say sort of to the larger moment, I think the first thing is that you should love the people that you're talking about. So I love Black people. Yes. I am a South Side of Chicago guy, vis-a-vis Mississippi. And so my work on Queen Sugar was very much dedicated to my mother, who has since passed, but it was from the Mississippi Delta. And it was, one of her, perhaps the favorite show that I've ever done. And because I was writing part of her experience into the television landscape in a lushly produced, intelligent show that was truly, truly a labor of love. So the first thing is just, write from a place of love and respect, as opposed to you going in like you're an ethnographer and, doing research, and then going to present something that you don't really know. So that's number one. The second thing I would say is, and I'm different from some TV writers and showrunners this way. I had to sort of learn over the course of my career to sort of find my people where I didn't have to sort of explain my philosophy of how you approach stories, particularly about diverse populations. And because I don't believe in having to explain why I exist. You know, if you do that, you end up spending a lot of energy doing that before you get to the creative work, actually. And so I think one of the reasons Queen Sugar resonated so well and Bel-Air is starting to resonate is that you start from the place of assuming that you belong in that space, in the world, and I don't have to explain to you why I'm here. But the other thing I wanted to say was that I believe that when you write and create and produce, that you, if you're interested in any sort of reality or authenticity, however you define that in your work, that you do write things as they are. But, and this is where I'm different from some people, I also believe in writing and creating and producing the world as you wish it were. Or are, you know, want to be. And so I believe in sort of putting that out there as a sort of vision of what you want to see. And some people would call that, you know, social justice, and some people would call that political. I just don't understand as a creative person, as a writer especially, why you would not write towards a vision of the world that you want to see. This country exists because a bunch of people got together in a room and created something that didn't exist. And they started with a piece of paper that we call now the Constitution. So writing is visionary work, and I take it very seriously, and it's a privilege to do it. And so that is how I sort of enter into addressing, you know, the moment as it is, but also the world as I wish it would become.
That was a very incredible answer. And now I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, what's next? Yeah. Incredible answer. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm glad I'm here. All right.
Can I, if I could
Yes,
follow
please.
up one, so we did this crazy thing that I probably never want to do again in my life. But I'm glad that we did it on Queen Sugar in our 5th season. We were, speaking of the pandemic, when the pandemic struck, we had just finished our 1st episode of the 5th season of the show. And the way that I work and run a show and have is particularly when you're doing cable or streaming, you have time to write before you shoot versus on network TV where you're sort of running and gunning at the same time, is I lay out a thesis statement for the season. And like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're saying. So we had this great season planned where it was going to be like, you know, we were going to, like, because so for those of you who don't know, Queen Sugar's about as a family drama where the patriarch dies and then he leaves a 800-acre sugarcane farm to his 3 sort of estranged siblings, and they have to sort of come together with their lives and deal with each other while trying to deal with the notion of the legacy of the sugarcane farm in Louisiana. So there's a lot of history there when you're talking about black people and ownership and all this other stuff. So it's really deliciously messy. We had this season planned where the season was supposed to be about that the nemesis, the family nemesis on the show, was going to run a highway through the town cemetery and dig up all the black people and dump them on the street, right? So, okay, so
Subtle, very subtle.
So it's going to be a huge battle through the season. Then the pandemic struck. And the studio and Ava DuVernay, who created the show, said, we can't shoot this season that you have already written. And we were trying to figure out what the protocols were going to be, how we're all going to stay safe. And remember, it was a very, very scary time. So they're like, you come from theater, right? Yeah. I was like, so can you write 10 episodes worth of 2 characters in a room for the whole season? And like get us 10 episodes out of that, and that way, because we can quarantine 2 or 3 actors together in a pod, and they literally deal with each other for 10 episodes for the whole season.
Insane.
And I was like, you know, I'm that theater kid. Like, you got a barn, let's put on a show. Let's go, right? Yeah. So literally, the conversation I had with the creator at that point was, we're living in a very special moment. If you rewind to 3 years to 2020, we're all stuck in our houses. The racial reconciliation or racial conversation is getting very, very hot. We're talking about George Floyd. We're talking about Ahmaud Arbery. We're talking about Breonna Taylor. We're talking about all of these things that me and my friends always talk about, but that now the whole world is talking about. And we felt we had a opportunity and perhaps even a responsibility to address the moment. And so if you go back and you watch the 5th season of Queen Sugar, you'll see a first episode that seems to be like, is gonna be about like this fight over like highway placement and cemetery. And suddenly in the 2nd and 3rd episode, everything shuts down. Everybody goes to their houses / our sets. And, and now we did something we'd never done before. It had always been sort of this timeless show, sort of, dealing with family issues. Now we were very much addressing 2020, and everything that was going on. And so I had the great privilege of writing a lot of episodes, but in one particular episode, an episode about the family's reaction to the murder of George Floyd. And it was, why I got into television is to be able to speak to the moment, as I said before, and also the world as you wish it were. And so I made the decision at the end of that episode that it was juxtaposed against a couple trying to have a honeymoon while the world was exploding around them. And at the end of it, they had sheltered their son from watching TV, and at the end of it, they decide to tell their 9-year-old son, they decide to give him the talk, as we talk about in the Black community, and is a term that now many other people know, which is about racial injustice, how to deal with police, and things like that. And so I wrote a very hard-hitting conversation that most people don't have to have with their 9-year-old kid. But it was a privilege to do so. I have twin sons and a daughter. It was me talking to them about the world as it is, but also trying to infuse into them a sense of hope about what the world could be. But first, you've got to live long enough to be able to work towards making your dreams happen. And so one of the wonderful things about being in television is that sometimes people pay attention. And it's a tough career, but I was very pleased by my peers to be nominated for a Humanitas Award for that episode. I didn't win, that's okay. But I was very pleased to be in the room and to be nominated and to be able to write about something and not sort of hide what you were talking about. There's great artistry in doing that and sort of burying the lead, but there's also great opportunity in being very explicit about what it is that you want to talk about, especially when the urgency of the issue calls for clarity. And that's what it called for in that moment, and I was appreciative of doing that. So that was one way to take what was a challenge, meaning producing in the pandemic, and turn it into an opportunity to tell stories that otherwise we wouldn't have gotten to tell. So.
If nothing else, everybody's here's watch list should be growing dramatically. Yeah. Dramatically. Thank you. Thank you. So, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about the technical aspects of shows. Art, as the visual effects expert, can you walk us through the plane crash sequence in the last season of Outer Banks, which we, I believe, saw in your clip?
So that was, one of the nuts and bolts kind of things we do on its larger scale. So there's a lot more that goes into it than, simple effects. This was a big pivotal moment in their first episode where a lot of the characters are in this plane. They crash in the water. Nobody dies, so it has to be, dramatic. But nobody's going to die. So,
not too dramatic.
Yeah, not too deadly. But anyway, the way we approached it, the executive producers on the show, the showrunners, they had a pretty good idea what they were looking for as far as how crazy of a crash it's going to be. And they provided us with some reference clips that they thought were kind of, what they were looking for, like where people, this is something that's survivable, but it's dramatic. So we kind of started with that, and it's good to have something to start with, like a goal that you're pushing for, because sometimes it's you got to fish a little bit, but here it helped. Then it was shot. There was no airplane there, and it was just water and an empty plate.
That's crazy in my mind.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand, but like, keep doing that.
So anyway, it's a lot of steps. I mean, it kind of is taking a greatest hits of individual shots and putting it all together. It's what we call a hard body type shot, where we have an object like an airplane. We have to build that, and it was a unique airplane. So the production side supervisor did all kinds of scans on set to get the geometry correct and texture reference. So we had to build that. Then we have to choreograph the crash. And it's a pretty long sequence. There's a lot of cuts. So not only do they have to work on their own, it has to work as a sequence. So you've got continuity you have to worry about. So once you get that all settled, then the fun stuff starts, where okay, now we got to do water, and that's always it kind of makes VFX people the hair on the back of their necks stand on end occasionally.
That is something I know. Water is hyper difficult.
Yeah, lots of times when in meetings, like where producers will say, and then we're water, and then the effects supervisor's like, water and fire. But we got a pretty good setup for that. So then you have to do all these simulations, because you got to create it from scratch, the water. And the way it's done with physics. It's all science-based. It's run with these complex simulations that take into account the mass of the object that's crashing, what it's crashing into, velocity. It's just there's so many variables, and it's a lot of computing power. And you in the best of situations, you need to do it many times, because to get it right, it's such a an intricate process. We did pretty well on it, and we still had to do it many times. Then you get to a point where it's all working and it's looking really great. Then it has to be put together, compositing. And then you have to go through and kind of sweeten things up. It's like, as a whole, this is really working, but, the showrunners will look at it and say, hey, but, this would be, we're looking for a little dramatic thing here.
More drama.
Yeah, give it a little, a little more pizzazz. So you go through and do another pass where you got to sweeten things up.
Do you do all this like in the middle of a regular production schedule?
Well, that's a great question. This is a Netflix streaming show, so there's more time.
Okay.
And this was also the first episode. So that's when everybody's all relaxed with the
Okay,
schedules.
right. It's a showrunner question, because
Yeah,
we
everyone
usually
up-
get like we get like,
Yeah.
9 days to shoot an episode.
Everyone
Yeah.
up here's running the timelines in their head, and they're like,
If it's a 10-episode season and you're doing this on episode 10,
Yeah.
everybody's a little nervous, because the time, everybody's like, how
We're
we
not
do-"
over budget yet on episode 1.
There's that too.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, we want to put another shot. Yeah, no problem. But in episode 10, it's like, well, we have no money left.
Right.
So yeah, it's pretty involved, and yeah, that's
and then if you did your job well, no one even know you did it.
that's the goal, because that's the other thing with a show like this. It's what we call invisible effects,
Love it.
where it's not anything supernatural or sci-fi. You can't hide behind that.
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, I come from a background with a lot of space stuff, a lot of supernatural stuff. Nobody's really seen that, so as long as it looks good, people are like, yeah, that's cool.
Colors, ooh.
Yeah, but then, something that we've all seen, like, say, a car crash or whatever, it's got to look,
Yeah.
convincing. And it has to, the viewer can't have to think about it. Like say, with your show, you're saying that you shot Toronto, but it had to be New York. That's visual effects.
We had over 1,000 visual effects shots.
That's
Yes.
huge.
Wow.
But
Chaos.
these shots, when they're ultimately in the show, in the final form, the viewer, you don't want to tip them off. You know, they need to look at it and think, oh yeah, I'm looking at New York. This is not a visual effects shot.
Insane.
So that's kind of what you strive for.
Genius is up here,
It's,
folks.
I was also going to add that as part of the production pipeline, the art department now is very involved in 3D modeling, and so a lot of
Yep.
our files end up going to you guys.
They certainly do, and it's very
on
helpful.
top of us.
Yeah, because you know the modeling takes a lot of time, and if somebody has, you know, like in the art department, has gone to the trouble of like, hey, we've got this. There's actually was some shots at the end of the season in this cave, where the art department had the designs, and it was just like, here's the models. It's like, well, great, we got a lot of the work, you know, the heavy lifting is done. Now just needs to, you know, execute and get into the shots. So yeah, that's definitely it.
Love it. This is now a collaboration panel. Things are being made as we speak. Andrew, The Old Way, as you mentioned earlier, scores uses a mix of Rocky Mountain folk music and traditional orchestra. How did you find that identity of the music and certain tone as the composer? I feel like you talked about it a little bit, but can you elaborate for us on the specifics?
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to me, like part of keeping things fresh whenever I'm working on a project is I always try to find, almost like how I've heard actors talk about, they always try to find a secret, right? Like
Don't get me started. I got lots of secrets.
I mean, yes, exactly. so they always say, oh, well, they're like, oh, I have a secret. They'll like keep something back, and that helps motivate their character. Well, I kind of find, I think, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but Jerry Goldsmith was once said he always tries to find something interesting that he can make like a unique thing about each score. So I've tried to adopt that into my own world of like, even if it's a straight ahead score, like a horror movie or something that would be pretty straight ahead orchestra, I always try to find something. I'm writing in a different way. I'm writing for a different instrument, featuring a different instrument. I did a horror movie recently where I did something something I called the piano guts, where someone just gave me the interior of an upright piano. So I just like banged on it and scraped it and made whale sounds with it. And like creating something that's unique and interesting in each movie is kind of, or with each project, has always been kind of like how I try to keep my edge. It also makes it interesting for me. Like you do your third thriller movie, you're like, how is it still going to be interesting, right? You don't want it to sound the same again,
Sure.
you know? And so you want each thing to have its own identity. So that was kind of the journey I went on with The Old Way, right? Like what was that identity? And also, sometimes producers and directors come to you and they have a very specific identity that they know they want already. We want this genre, we want this style, we want these things. And that's great, and it can be, and that's an awesome part of collaboration, but sometimes they don't know. And this is kind of what the situation was on this movie, where they really didn't know what they wanted, and it was really just kind of aimless in its direction. And especially so, it's like it's heavily coded that part of the hook of the movie is the two lead characters are on the spectrum in the film. And there's an interesting question of like, what does a person on the spectrum in like 1913 do? Right? Like, what is that like?
Whoa.
You know?
Wow.
And what's that experience like? And obviously, there's still this like it's not a super heavy movie, but there's this interesting idea of so the portrayal of the actors is pretty stoic. So it's Nicolas Cage not being Nicolas Cage, right? It's Nicolas Cage being more reserved, and there's a lot of space to fill, right? It's like he still has these emotions, but they're not expressed in the same way. So there was a lot of concern of like there's this very intimate fireside chat in the movie that like he opens up to his daughter when he realizes that she is the same as him in this way, and how do we fill that in? Because the version I got, there's no direction at all. Like it just feels like Nicolas Cage being very stoic in a fireside chat, and that was not. It just didn't do it any favors, right? It makes the performance feel very flat. It feels like why on earth is he acting this way? But really, we have to highlight the emotion. So for me, taking the banjo stuff by Seth Taylor and taking these guitars and fiddles and all these different things and creating this very intimate tone helped fill in that bottom gap. You know?
Got it. Yeah.
And that was really the motivation behind that. That was my edge on that, right?
Sure. The details, folks.
Details.
So, my panelists, you will have to forgive me. We are running out of time, and I had so many cool questions left for you guys, but I do have one that I want to make sure that we do get in because I feel it's important, and this is for everybody. So, we're going to start on this end, and we're going to go down the line. The question is, and this is honestly to benefit you guys, and secretly me as well. What advice would you give to people looking to pursue a career in entertainment? It can be specific to your field or the field that you're in or to the industry as a whole. And I'm going to stall a little bit while I let my panelists come up with a good answer. And if we're ready on this end, what do you think? Yeah? Okay, cool. Let's do it.
I'll jump at this from a writer point of view. I love being a writer. I call it the poor man's art. All you need is an idea and a piece of paper or a pen or a pencil, and you can literally begin the process of changing, if not the world, you can change your world that way. I sometimes do some teaching, and one of the things that young writers, when they start out wanting to do TV and film, they oftentimes think they need to come up with some fantastic brand new concept. Sorry, Ghostface is sitting in the audience. I got a little afraid. But
I didn't notice that until you said it. I'm like, oh.
You weren't there before. But anyway, writers oftentimes think they have to come up with new writers, some brand new huge concept, the action sequence that no one has ever seen, the high concept movie that's about, a planet with no water and whatever it is. And those can be great ideas. Please create those. But the thing that tends to get you some traction as a new writer is coming to it with your voice and coming to it with your point of view. And instead of running away from yourself by creating a fantasy, it's usually the thing you write where you run towards yourself, that thing that you don't want to talk about, or that thing that scares you just a little bit to write about. That's where your power is, actually. And most writers, including successful writers, spend their whole life trying to go deeper and deeper into their own experience or their own point of view and putting that on paper. And I'm a big fan of telling people who may be from either marginalized communities or they come from, they don't come from money or anything like that. A lot of times those people have to be encouraged to take their own experiences and stories seriously. And I like to encourage people to do that. That is probably the way you're going to write the thing that resonates the most with somebody in a position of power to give you that first break.
That was also life advice. Take note. Art, how about yourself?
My advice, anybody here on this panel, it's a very creative, artistic field, and I think it's really useful in your education. Take a lot of art classes, and it doesn't even have to be, specifically tailored to one, like, oh, I want to be a cinematographer, so I need to do X, Y, Z. Yeah, you'll do that stuff, but just general, like your general ed art stuff, draw, paint, photography, writing. I mean, any of that. That's what you want to have, a well-rounded creative background going in, because I find I'm constantly drawing on all these things that I've done through the years, whether it's photography, drawing, whatever. Even art history. I mean, just understanding the visuals, the creative process, and using those muscles will serve you quite well.
Incredible. Stay in school. School's good. Robyn?
Yeah. So I think I want to first say I agree with Art. This is a creative job, even if it seems maybe too technical. your creative side is what's going to get you motivated and keep you going, because honestly, we all smiles up here, but sometimes it's a long slog to get stuff done. So if you don't have your creative heart, it's not going to work for you. Second thing I want to say is I'm probably the crux of every person on this panel. I get to have the VFX. I have the writers to think about, the executive producers, creators, and showrunners. I have the composers giving me things. I have production design who yes, no, maybe, and wardrobe and hair. I see all of that in my system and have all of that input from so many multiple people. So even though there's beautiful, amazing, creative art on TikTok and Instagram, beyond that is being able to work with all of these people, because without that, you don't have a show. So everybody's got to have that capacity to be part of that team to make that show happen. It's beautiful to do, like, I see so many amazing things on Instagram. It's amazing. But without learning, like, what does the cinematographer do? What does the composer bring? You know, what's going on in production? What happened in the writer's room? You are the one who sort of puts all of that down and boils it down to a show. So that's what I would say. Look to the people around the creativity of being an editor and start listening and hearing and understanding a little bit about what everybody's bringing to the table.
This is life advice too. I love it. I love it. Cabot, how about you?
Well, I agree with everyone.
Yeah, you have the easy job now. All they have to do is agree, right? At the end.
Seriously, we're all individual artists, but it's teamwork that makes the dream work. And each one of us, all of you, we're all storytellers. If you wake up in the morning, you have pictures in your head or in your heart, just do it. There's so many tools out there right now that are just phenomenally easy to get into and to distribute to everybody who's looking for something interesting. So just do it.
No, I'm a producer, but I also direct. I've done probably most of the departments other than gripping. I'm married to a grip, so that works out well. But I think the main thing is be kind to yourself. It's really beautiful work, but can be very difficult. You can have great champions, and you'll have a lot of people who discourage you and will size you up and actually project whatever their insecurities are onto you. So you really have to build your cadre, your people, right, who are just going to create a collective. You can create things together, as you're saying, on your own. I'm more of a communal person. And also decide what the stories are you want to tell in the world. As Anthony is saying, you know, I'm interested in creating stories that create joy, freedom, that create connectivity between people, right? I just think people are fascinating. And so we should be kinder to one another. And I think in that, if you're going to become a producer, director, VFX, editor, know what it is, your value is, right? And work at that craft. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise, because what your story is you're bringing, no one else can tell. And so be specific and love the community you're talking about, right? Don't feel you have to do anything. Tell the stories you want to tell.
And lastly, quickly, Andrew,
Yeah,
any last words of wisdom?
I mean, everyone said amazing stuff. I'm just going to reiterate. If whatever you want to do, start doing it. Right? You have more power in your pocket with your iPhone than more people have access to ever. Right? It's so easy to get started in anything. Start doing that. That's your tools. You're learning your trade. And then the other thing is, don't take things personally. As difficult as that may be, this industry has a ton of ups and downs. You know, maybe that thing didn't work out this time, but you have no idea what the people next to you are going to be doing. You have no idea what that editor is going to be doing. You have no idea what that producer is going to be doing. They may think, oh, like, I remember that Rachel did this, and she would be great for that. Or Anthony did this, and he would be awesome for this. And I'm going to call them, you know. Yeah. So never burn your bridges and try not to take it personally. So,
entertainment advice, life advice. You guys, thank you. So that is all the time we have for today. Thank you to our panelists, Anthony, Art, Robyn, Cabot, Rachel, and Andrew for being here with us today to discuss their creative work. Also, thank you to Impact 24 PR and WonderCon for putting this panel together, and to all of you guys for joining us.